Sometimes all you feel like doing is doom scrolling on your phone, drained of energy, purpose, and motivation. But what if life didn't have to be that way? What if you aren't actually lazy, but instead you just don't know a few simple frameworks? I'm going to break it all down for you in this video so that by the end of it, you'll know how to work without motivation so that you can live the life of your dreams. Let's start by unpacking a huge limiting belief that you probably don't even realize is destroying your life. You aren't lazy. You just lack energy and discipline, and the two are more connected than you might think. So discipline, what is that? Because we can define it very broadly. To some, it just means doing the hard, necessary things. David Goggins is a big proponent of just doing the hard work. No matter what it takes, just remind yourself of the necessity of doing it. But to a lot of people who struggle with discipline, just do it doesn't seem to really help. So let's break down what discipline is and how it's connected to energy. So why are you tired right now? Have you been working hard? Or is it that there's nothing fueling you? That there's nothing you do that recharges you? If that's the case, then you need to find work that does recharge you. See, I used to think I was lazy since I just sat around and played video games all day in high school. I was unmotivated, so I didn't do any work. But really, it was just the fact that I wasn't doing the work that truly motivated and inspired me. It wasn't necessarily that I was lazy. I just didn't have a purpose or somewhere to direct the excess energy in my life, or even a way to get energy back. So in high school, I had to develop a lot of discipline because in order to go to the college that I wanted to go to, I realized that I was really far behind. So for most of my life, I would have considered myself lazy. I would consider myself undisciplined. If there was something that I knew I needed to do, I would often, not really care too much about it. I would procrastinate all the time on English papers, studying for exams. No matter what it was, I just didn't really feel like working a whole ton. And I could get by sort of like prioritizing my energy and putting my focus in the right spots to still get decent grades. But when I was a senior in high school, I realized that I was dramatically underprepared to go to the top 10 schools in the country. See, for my whole life, I wanted to, be an engineer. I wanted to go to Caltech or MIT, but I didn't really fully comprehend just how hard it is to get into some of these schools. And so when some of my peers, were competing in national speech and debate tournaments, they were, athletes, captains of their clubs, or they were going to, mock trials or Model United Nations, different clubs that I really didn't, feel very involved with. When a lot of my friends were doing these types of activities, studying for the SAT, studying for the ACT, getting those perfect scores, getting 4.0s, I didn't have much of that. And so I felt very underprepared. So my senior year, I realized that in order to actually set the goal that I had, in order to actually reach the goal that I had created for myself, I actually would need to work hard and put in discipline. And I think that's when something clicked for me, when I actually had a, very tangible thing that I was working towards for the next 4 months with a deadline, right? There was a limited amount of time for me to take the ACT, which is a exam you need to take for college here. There was a limited amount of time for me to sort of, get involved in activities that I could put on my resume and that I could show as proof of my academic excellence or my excellence in other areas. And so I just needed to do the work, but it became so much easier when I actually created a deadline for myself and when the goal was something that I chose, right? I wanted to get into a good college. This wasn't something that was extrinsically motivated. So in college, I went into it with that type of mentality, doing what was necessary for the goals that I create for myself. So what I'm trying to say is that you're not lazy. You just don't have a defined goal and a path to get there. Life isn't boring. It's not supposed to feel easy. Life is best lived when you feel like if you don't keep your foot on the gas, you're going to get outpaced. You either grow or you die. And you also don't need motivation to work. But you might be thinking to yourself, aren't I saying the exact opposite? I'm saying that you need a goal and that motivation comes after you find this goal that you define for yourself. And while that's true, there's still going to be paths during that, you reaching your goal when you actually have no motivation, when no motivation comes and yet you need to do the work anyways. So the difference in those moments of whether you do the work or you don't do the work is having that clear outcome that you're working towards. So instead of motivation, you can use habits, accountability, and reminders. So habits are the bedrock of discipline. It means even when there's, no intrinsic motivation, you're still being motivated by extrinsic factors. So habits are really powerful because they happen automatically, right? They're an automatic response to certain stimuli. And so you can use them to create discipline for yourself and make discipline easy instead of hard. Accountability means telling your friends and family about your goals and holding your friends as accountable as you hold yourself. And if they're good friends, they'll do the same for you. Accountability has helped me when, I've lacked a lot of motivation, because it sort of is a nice reminder that we're all in this together. So I have creative friends, we can keep each other accountable with some of our creative projects. So, with some of my writing friends, we'll have weekly check-ins. Oh, what have you written? Oh, what have you written? And that's a way that can, keep all of us accountable. That's a way that we can keep each other accountable. And in lots of, clubs or different organizations, these are often great because, you hold each other accountable. It's a lot less work than maybe constantly holding yourself accountable. At the end of the day, the only person who can truly allow you to hold yourself accountable is yourself. But friends and family help a lot. And then reminders also help, of your goals, of your commitments, of your dreams, so that you don't forget why you're putting in the work. There may be moments where you feel like it's useless. You're like, oh, what am I doing this work for anyways? And if you have a clear, simple reminder, I'm doing this work because I want to achieve this goal, that's a lot easier to get back to work or to work without motivation. Passion is important, but it also deceives. No life is passionately lived 100% of the time. There are times when you will just need to put in the work. My junior year in college, something clicked. When I studied at USC, I realized what will be necessary to follow my dreams, and I fully committed to a plan that I created for myself. Once you commit, you expose yourself to vulnerability mentally. But for me, committing was the best thing I could have done. See, in college, I wanted to be an engineer, right? For most of my life, I wanted to be an engineer. And that changed in college my freshman year when we were sent home because of COVID. And I watched a movie, Ratatouille, that changed my life, right? And that gave me the idea that movies and media can be transformational. They don't just have to be pure entertainment. And so I wanted to be a part of creating, transformational media. And so when I learned about the film industry, when I learned about possible career paths there, I did everything I could to meet as many people as I could, to talk to as many people as I could, in order to learn what a career in the film industry would be and would mean. And when I created this goal for myself, I knew that in some ways it would be less clear than, a career in engineering. For me, a career in engineering would be relatively simple, right? My dad did computer science, and so I had an idea of what, using math and science would look like. But it just really wasn't something that truly motivated me. It wasn't something that got me out of the bed every morning excited. It wasn't something that I felt like I had a lot of passion for. And so, I'm not saying that passion is useless. It's important. It gives you a lot of information about yourself, but you can't be, it's just not something that you can rely on. You don't need motivation to work. You just need a good enough goal. And so for me, finding a career that I really was motivated to work at helped a lot. It helped me in those moments where no motivation came. But I realized that this goal, this path that I created for myself was something that, gave my life a lot of purpose. And so it was easy to, or at least easier in those moments to work without motivation. Okay, but, I've been saying that you don't need motivation to work and that, it's easy to do the hard things, but what are the tricks? How do you actually work without motivation? So, sometimes no matter how good your goal is, you're going to feel tired. It's okay to take breaks, but first you should ask yourself, why are you tired? Did you wake up early to exercise, then work on your projects for hours? If you're tired here, there's an easy solution, and it means to take a conscious break. But, if you've been going through life in a haze, if you're not really working a lot, but you still feel tired, it's probably because you're not doing enough of the things that truly motivate and give you energy. And so, for me, that means I'm not working out enough. I'm not playing a sport, maybe. I'm not writing. I'm not filming. I'm not reading. I'm not meditating. I'm not, maybe playing video games that once used to excite me. So not all of these things are necessarily productive things, but that doesn't mean that they're not important. So try to identify for yourself, what are the things that recharge you? For some people, it might be a social outing. For others, that's something that completely drains them, and reading a book is the thing that recharges them. And so I think, ideally, a lot of the work that recharges you is also the work that you need to do in order to achieve your goals. And when that happens, it's a really happy marriage, because for me, I want a career in the film industry. And so working on creative projects, learning more about the film industry, right? Watching movies, all these things are things that recharge me, and they're also useful for my long-term goals. So if you find a great overlap there, that's amazing. And it means that you should focus and hone in on that thing and see how you can get even better at that. So, again, not all these are technically productive, but that doesn't mean that they're not important. Goals demand sacrifices, and there has to be a balance in all things. So the 5 habits that I try to stick to, these work for me, and hopefully some of them work for you as well, is number 1, getting out of bed quickly in the morning. This is something that just starts my day off right. And when I don't do it, when I just sort of lounge around and slowly wake up, I feel guilty with myself for having wasted a lot of time. And then it just starts the day off with an L for me. Number 2, personally, is just eating enough food. And for you, that might just be taking care of your body, or, sticking to a diet that works for you. But that's something that I could probably honestly do a better job of. But is one of those habits that if I'm not consistently doing, it has a noticeable effect on me. 3 is spending time working on my career or passion projects. And this is a habit that I'm really happy with now. I feel like consistently now, when I have a free chunk of time, I put that time towards my career or towards passion projects that I'm working on. But it took a lot of time and effort and building of habits in order to get to that point. And, I didn't always have that discipline, right? I used to have, dreams of working on creative projects, maybe dreams of making YouTube videos like this one, or dreams of making short films. But I didn't necessarily have that discipline to do it even when I wasn't motivated. I would only work on it when I was motivated. And I think that's how most people work, right? You only work if you have this motivation. And when you don't have that motivation, well, the motivation to watch a TV show or the motivation to go out with friends, that's just going to overpower any other type of discipline or habits that you've created for yourself. And so I think once you build that habit for yourself, it makes it easy to work, because you no longer have to, rely on like the hard discipline of saying no to things. You can, because you have this habit that you've created for yourself. Oh, I set aside this amount of time each week to work on this project, and that's a non-negotiable, right? Well, then it's very easy to just say, oh, no, I don't think I'll go out tonight because I'm working on this. That's just what I do. It's no longer, oh, am I going to do this or that? You sort of remove that decision for yourself. And in removing that decision for yourself, it saves a lot of energy. And then another thing for me is just working out enough. So working out at least 3 times a week. Honestly, that's something I could do a bit better job at. But I think it reminds me of something that David Huberman talked about on his podcast with David Goggins, which is that there's a part of the brain that when you do hard things, it grows. And so, in people who, are not able to, maybe don't have that discipline, it's maybe a tiny part of the brain, right? You can't really overcome a hard task, or you don't, when something is required of you, you need to do it, but you really don't feel like doing it, you just won't do it. But for people who, are athletes specifically, or for people who are trained, or for people who need to do something difficult consistently, it's not that thing ever gets easier, right? An athlete who's lifting 200 pounds and then going on a 10-mile run, right? That's, arguably harder than someone doing 50 pounds and going on a, 1-mile jog, right? It's not like the task itself gets any easier. So why is the person who's able to do the harder thing, why are they able to do it more easily? It all comes down to the fact that life doesn't get easier, right? Nothing ever gets easier. But as you grow, as you develop yourself, you become more capable of taking on harder challenges. And so I think that's something that really motivates me, and at least motivates me to try to hit the gym. And then the fifth habit for me is just remembering to be present. I think it's something that I consistently find myself in the habit of not doing. And so I'm just trying to, when there's a moment to be enjoyed, just be grateful for the things that I have. So that's something that I try to remember to do. And they help me, even though it's not necessarily directly tied to motivation. All of these are things that recharge me, help fuel me, make sure that I'm in the best possible position to work without motivation. And this last one I think is crucial for everyone, no matter who you are. We can always try to be more present for the moments that really matter. So the 7 deadly habits, avoid these if you want to become successful. Number 1 is making excuses. I think it's very easy to make an excuse and then rationally find a way to not do the work or to not do the thing that, you've committed to doing. And so when you make a commitment to yourself, right, and you're saying, I'm going to do this, if no new information has come your way and then you decide not to do it, then you're just breaking a promise with yourself. And if you do that enough times, you're just going to become a liar and a bad friend to yourself. And so I think it's important when you're making an excuse to really think about, okay, do I have new information? Is there something that's come to light that makes it so that I can no longer hold to this commitment, or it doesn't make sense to hold to this commitment? Like, maybe if you make the commitment to work out at least once a week, but then you injure yourself, right, really badly, well, it doesn't make sense to work out, right? You have new information, and therefore, to me, that isn't really like you're breaking a commitment to yourself. That's just something has changed, and now you are adapting accordingly. But for a lot of cases, it's, nothing like that happens. It's really just an excuse. Like, you can think to yourself, oh, I probably should work out today, but I ate a really big lunch. I'm just feeling a bit heavy right now. And so really carefully think about, okay, is this serious, right? Like, are you in physical pain? Are you not able to, are you on the verge of throwing up? Is this like a thing where you need to seek medical attention? No, probably, right? Most likely it's just that you ate a little bit too much, in which case, realistically, even you can tell you can be honest with yourself and say, yeah, I could still work out. It might be a little bit more unpleasant, but, it won't be the end of the world and it's not going to kill me. But it's very easy to make that excuse and then to rationally find a way to avoid guilt, right? Because that's all an excuse is, really. It's a way to avoid guilt that we feel for ourselves. But the best way not to feel that guilt is just to stick to your commitments in the first place. So number 2, deadly habit, I think, sort of ties more into physical health, but it's just not being conscious of your diet. I'm not a dietitian, so I'm not going to say anything, necessarily give any advice. But it also ties in with number 3, which is, and number 4, which are all related to sleep. And I think sleep is something that people don't, like if there was one way to work without motivation, it's probably just to sleep more, to take care of yourself. Like, those things will put you in a better state physically to work. And so then it's going to be easier to not make excuses for yourself, right? If you're not tired in the first place, it's going to be a lot easier to work because that's not even an excuse, right? You're more capable of working. And then, number 4 sort of ties into something I said earlier, which is just sleeping in when you don't physically need to. I think sort of, there's one thing if you really need to catch up on sleep and it's healthy for you to sleep in, but most of the time that's not the case. And it just feels good to do that. Or most of the time you need to really start going to bed earlier. Number 5, I think, is avoiding hard work, or avoiding exercise, anything that's necessarily hard. Because I think when you avoid it, it just becomes harder to do in the future. And so I guess that ties into excuses, but, I think, it's still something that can be deadly for your growth. Number 6, procrastination, which I think is, something that a lot of people struggle with. And it's something that I've definitely struggled with, which is, tied into number 7, which is being trapped by, the fears that are in your head. And so this last fear, is really what I think, to me, everything boils down to. In order to work without motivation, you need to eliminate all the things that are stopping you or holding you back. And I think usually it's not that sometimes it could be that you lack energy or passion, but a lot of the times it's that you have fear and you have anxiety, right? So when, you don't want to start a task or project because of the emotions that it's going to bring up, right? Because, when you're working on maybe a screenplay that you've been writing for a couple months, and, when you think about maybe starting that task reminds you of the fact that you haven't been putting in enough work into it in the first place, right? And so it brings up these negative emotions, and really that goes away within the first 10 minutes, right? You sort of get into it, you get into a flow state after like maybe 20 minutes. But that your body at least knows that within that first maybe 5 to 10 minutes, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be pleasant. You're maybe going to be frustrated, and you're going to be thinking about the fact that, oh, what's the point of this, right? You're going to lose all motivation, and you're going to lose desire to maybe stick with this goal or this commitment that you've created for yourself. And if you were to eliminate all that fear, then there's no friction, right? And instead of relying on motivation or discipline to work, you rely on other things like habits, right? If you had external reminders, you could have something that just reminds you, 6 p.m. every day, I spend an hour writing. And if there's no negative baggage emotionally that comes with that time, then you don't need motivation to work. It's just something that you do every day at 6 p.m. Let's get into what procrastination is, right? So is it the fear of failure? Is it the fear of beginnings? Is it the fear of judgment? The fear of too many options and not enough time? The thing is, it's all of these and much more. Fear is what prevents us from living our best lives. Some far wiser than me call it the mind killer. So what's the secret to eliminating this fear and never procrastinating ever again? So put all the concepts from this video into practice. Take action if you're someone who loves to think conceptually for hours, and take some time to reflect if you're someone who, loves to move quickly and has a hard time slowing down. Treat work like it's going to the gym. Be consistent with it. Sometimes it's fun, but it's always going to be challenging. If there's no challenge to life, it's just boring. You don't want that. And it's not that you're lazy. It's that you can't focus on the things you need to focus on. So here is how I work without motivation and how you can too. The first thing is to create habit stacks, which is one of my favorite concepts from Atomic Habits. Habit stacks are basically triggers or cues for your mind, right? And I love the idea of this because it relies on external stimulus, which is actually the definition of a habit, right? A habit is something that's not actually goal-oriented or sort of motivation-oriented. It is something that just happens based on some external cue, right? So, think about it like your alarm goes off, you wake up, you get out of bed, right? That's a habit. It's not because in that moment, every moment, you're like, you know what? In order to achieve the goals that I want to achieve, I need to wake up early and make the most of every day. Like in that moment, that's not what you're thinking of. And in that moment, you're probably still half asleep, right? And so that's the best example of where a habit can be extremely effective. Because even in this moment when you're half asleep, if you have a good habit of, okay, the alarm goes off, I get up out of bed, brush my teeth, do skincare, do all these things, right? Do this routine. If that is like seamless and natural for you, you don't even have to think about am I going to do it? Am I not going to do it? It's just something that you do and it's easy and it's seamless. And so habit stacks are something that have changed my life, have made me so much more productive because instead of, you know, I wouldn't actually say that's been, that productivity is the thing that's helping me with most. I think it's just staying consistent, right? Doing what you say you're going to do. All right, the next step is to create a reward system. And, you know, internal motivation is fleeting, but external motivation can be constructed, right? So if you can almost treat life like a video game and create a reward system based on the things that you want to be doing, that can be an extremely powerful motivator. And this can be combined with habit stacks, right? So maybe there's like a special treat that you enjoy, right? This is a really common one. You create a habit of, okay, every single time I write, 5 pages in a screenplay, I'm going to treat myself to a Snickers bar, or something like that, right? Well, what that does is it not only creates an external motivator that causes you to work that's consistent, right? Because instead of relying on that internal motivation of just enjoying the work and, enjoying the process, not every time when you sit at a blank page are you just going to feel motivated to write, right? And so how do you start? Well, you trick your brain. You trick your brain into thinking that it's going to get dopamine at the end of this reward, right? Which actually causes your brain to start to release those chemicals in order to get you motivated in the first place. So it actually sort of hijacks this natural brain chemistry that we have. And so you can use an external reward to actually create intrinsic motivation, which is really cool. And, number 4, something that I've already talked about, is to have a great goal. I said this before, but it's a lot easier to work without motivation if the goal you're working towards is something you genuinely want. And I cannot stress how important this is, because I see and meet so many people who just seem lost. They don't know what they want to do with their lives. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, right? I've been that person before, where you just confused, and in those moments, it's very hard to find motivation to do anything, right? Like you don't know what your future looks like. You don't even know what you want it to look like, right? So if you don't know what life you want, it makes it really hard to put in the work, because you're not sure that the work you're going to do is actually going to pay off and get that thing that you want. And that is completely valid. It's actually very logical. It makes a lot of sense, right? Like, if you don't know the path to getting to where you want to go, right? If you're sort of completely unclear on it, then you could just be taking a stab in the dark, right? And the work you're doing could be something that is completely useless, right? And it gets you no closer to the goal that you want to get to. But, that all kind of changes when you have not only a clear goal, but a clear path to get there. And so try and do as much introspection as you can on that. And then also, just one super simple piece of advice that I have is to treat work like you're going to the movies. And Liam Porritt has a great video on this where he explains his system for getting into flow. But I think, if you don't know what flow is, it's this concept of, this moment where you're working towards something and it's just at the right challenge level where, it's challenging enough to sort of force you to put all of your attention to it, right? So it's not something that's just easy that, you could do while listening to music, or you could do while, like doing it with one hand. But it's also not something incredibly hard, right? It's not something that's daunting or necessarily makes you feel bad about your skills or your abilities. It's something that's just right there. You can see how, you need to work at it. It's just a really satisfying puzzle, right? And video games, I think, are really great at getting you into the flow state, right? Especially games like Dark Souls, Elden Ring, right? These games where you feel like, man, like you're getting a little bit closer towards beating this level, beating that boss. And it just feels so good, right? To be in that moment of flow where you feel like all of your energy and all of your actions are something that, you're not even necessarily conscious of. You're sort of in this flow state, right? And that's one of the most enjoyable states to be in. I think like when you know that you're sort of onto something, whether that's a career or a passion or some type of work that you're doing, if you find it easy to get into that flow state for that kind of work, that is a really great sign that that's what you should be doing more of, right? But in order to get into that flow state, it's actually a little bit difficult, right? Not every single time where you work 3 hours sitting down and writing is it going to be something that's good, right? Or is it going to be something that's even enjoyable, which is actually more important? Because, if you can't enjoy it, why are you going to want to do it? Which is the whole thing about needing motivation to work. But since we don't need motivation to work, we can use those tricks that we've learned about, right? Habit stacking. We can create a ritual. We can get water. We can get snacks. We can get ready to focus, and we can treat work like it's going to the movies, which I love the concept of this because you sort of immediately know what you're supposed to do, right? Because if you're going to the movies, you're being very intentional about it, at least if it's a movie that you care about, right? If you're the one who's deciding which movie you get to see. And so you go and you turn your phone off, right? You're prepared. You've hopefully already gone to the bathroom. You've gotten water. You've gotten snacks, right? You're ready to sort of sit down and not think about anything else except for this thing for the next hour and a half. And, imagine if you treated your work that same way. If you sat down, you already went to the bathroom, you put on some nice relaxing music, you really get into the mood, you create a ritual around it. So this is something that you consistently do. And, it takes 20 minutes on average to really get into flow. And this whole process really helps with those first 20 minutes where it's not enjoyable, right? Those first 20 minutes might be you struggling through, where was I? What was I doing when I was last working on this project, right? It might be confusing. It might be just mind numbing. You're like, oh, I'm going through all these documents. You're making no progress, right? But after about 20 minutes, right, when you actually get into the zone, you start getting back into the work. That's really where flow can happen. And at that moment, if you've experienced this, you know what I'm talking about. Time just sort of no longer has an effect on you, right? It doesn't matter now, oh, am I going to be working for 3 hours? Am I going to be working for 1 hour? It all sort of like melds together. And it's a very enjoyable state. It's one of my favorite states to be in. And I hope after this video, you can get into it more often. So all of this advice is based on finding your purpose for living. You never fully answer it, but you can always be closer to it. So one thing I have to ask you, do you want to find your purpose? If you do, I made a video all about that. So you can check it out here if you want to learn more.